The American comic book industry is basically imploding before our very eyes, and the only people that don't seem to realize it are the people actually in the comic book industry. All the signs are there that basically things are not good. Sales are down very steeply, but fortunately for Marvel, DC, and some of the other publishers, they're not actually divulging most of that information because they're trying to hide just how badly things are going. But if you go into the numbers, the information that is available to you, it's pretty easy to see just in what kind of dire straits the American comic book industry is in, but they are very delusional about it. When I say they, I mean basically 80 to 90% of the people that are actually in the comic book industry. There are like the 10 to 20% that actually know what's going on, and they're fighting it out. They're going, man, I hope things turn around. But basically the writing is on the wall that it's all dead. Recently, Basement Brothers Collectibles, who follows the channel, seems like a good guy, oftentimes commenting on my videos. Apparently, they rated to someone that was furloughed by one of the smaller indie comic book publishers, and they had some very, very interesting information regarding the state of the industry as that person who is currently furloughed and not getting paid sees it. And it is not the same comic book industry you see or I see or anybody with two functioning eyes see. The delusion is absolutely there. They are not willing to accept that they have destroyed basically an entire industry. Something so American, it should be considered apple pie, and we've handed it over to Japan and European comic publishers. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I think manga is great, but I would like for American comic books to be great again as well, considering we mastered the whole damn thing, but then we decided to burn it into oblivion. Not me, not you, but the idiots actually in charge. These are some of the dumbass things that this furloughed individual from one of these indie publishers had to say to Basement Brothers Collectibles. They believed the main reason the company was doing so poorly in laying off employees was because a fire in California caused a paper shortage, making them unable to print and sell enough comic books. The reason that they can't sell comic books isn't because there's not enough paper, it's because there's not enough customers. There's not enough interest. There's not enough hype. There's not enough people interested in mainstream, what we consider mainstream American comic books right now, let alone their poor indie brethren who depend on Marvel and DC to basically keep the entire thing alive. And when I said there aren't enough customers, and that is a lie. I absolutely lied to your face right there. I didn't mean to, but that is not true, because if you actually look at the amount of people reading comic books this very day, not only in America, but around the world, there are more comic book readers today than there have ever been. They're just not reading DC. They're not reading Marvel. They're not really reading Image. They're not reading American comic books. They're reading manga. And if they're little kids, they're not going to the drugstore to pick up Batman or Spider-Man or X-Men. They're going to pick up Dogman. The American comic book publishers have made themselves completely irrelevant to the ecosystem of comic books worldwide, let alone in America as well. That's the reason that you're out of a job. You couldn't create demand for your product because you made bad comic books. You can blame it on wildfires in California and paper shortages all you want. That is absolutely not the case. You just don't have enough customers right now. They also viewed manga and anime as parallel markets, not as competition. They think people who read manga will still buy their books, or that they are separate customer bases, so they don't have to fret about competing with manga. Well, they certainly don't have to fret about competing with manga. Nobody in America is competing with manga right now. Outside of IDW's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin hardcover, there ain't a lot going on with American comic books. Manga used to be the competition. It used to be an alternative. Now we've flipped it around, and DC and Marvel and Image and all these publishers are the alternative to manga. If you don't want to read mainstream comic books, if you don't want to jump on board to the mainstream comic book publishing industry, which is manga and manhwa, it's Japan and Korea that are dominating everything right now. We've known that for several years now. And this just didn't like happen overnight or anything. This was being built up to, and then all of a sudden, boom, there were enough customers out there that were frothing at the mouth for comic books. They couldn't get them from Marvel and DC, and next thing you know, manga has blown up to heights that it had never seen, or even probably even conceived of outside of like the Asian markets themselves. Just absolutely blew up in America and absolutely ate their lunch. No, manga is not competition for DC and Marvel anymore. Manga is competition for enormous book publishers. Manga is competition for Cartoon Network and stuff like that. Things with actual enormous mainstream audiences, not little bitty tiny niche audiences like what DC and Marvel have done to themselves. So you're actually right about that one. Because you like reading manga or manhwa doesn't mean that you're going to go over to DC and Marvel and maybe taste test the competition and enjoy that as well. If you like manga and manhwa, you likely like comic books, which DC and Marvel are, but you likely like comic books that are written at an extremely high level, which you will not get at DC and Marvel for the most part. They've absolutely taken themselves out of the game, and no, they are not competition. They also don't view other indie publishers as competition. They view them as fellow collaborators. They've noticed their future market is young girls and women and diverse storytelling. Yet they had no data or recommendations to give Basement Brothers Collectibles to actually see where their reasoning came from. Yes, they did absolutely pull that one out of their asses. There just aren't any numbers to suggest there's a mainstream female audience for American comic books, which for the most part have veered towards superheroes for about 50 or 60 years now, maybe even a little bit longer than that, since we had something else that was the flavor of the day when it came to American comic books. Yes, there are a few titles out there, like a Saga, that certainly brings in a different demographic than most of the other comic books out there, and they've tried to capitalize on that and build a bigger audience out of it. That's how we got stuff like Bitch Planet. Guess what? They like Saga and nothing else. They've tried to go down this road. They've tried to build up this female superhero comic buying audience that absolutely does not exist. As far as indie publishers not considering other indie publishers as competition, this is one of the reasons that American comic books are becoming insignificant. Nobody out there wants to be the very best. DC and Marvel are just so happy at the success of manga, and they think they're somehow a part of that, even though they're not reaping any of the benefits or the financial rewards, or they're not getting any of the sales or the notoriety. People are basically laughing at them, but as far as they're concerned, we're part of the same ecosphere. That's really our success because manga is successful. The lack of competition in there and the lack of, I don't know, just give a fucktitude. At the fact that you're absolutely getting your asses handed to you, it's why you're dying. Because if you don't realize that you're failing, if you don't take it personally, if you don't take it as a challenge onto yourself when somebody else is out there doing something similar to you and absolutely kicking your ass in every single measurable way, like you have no fight left in you, and there is no fight left in the American comic book industry. We're not competition to each other, we're collaborators. And that's why the same writers work for 5 or 6 different publishers in a given goddamn year. There's no sense of loyalty to a publisher. There's no sense of loyalty to a character. There's no sense of ownership in any of this stuff. You don't have to do a good job when you work at DC because Marvel's still going to hire you. You don't have to do a good job when you're writing X-Men comic books because you can go to DC and write fucking Batman or something like that. I'm looking at you, Tini Howard. You don't have to do a good job when you get your big break on Captain America. You'll still get hired at Valiant Comics to do their flagship character, Exo-Man War. Nobody wants to be the best-selling comic book writer in America right now, other than like Mark Miller. He's the only one that seems to give a fuck about kicking ass and taking names when it comes to the American comic book industry. And that's why everyone is failing so badly right now. And that's why all these publishers are going out of business. IDW is going out of business. We know that Valiant's going out of business. We already lost a couple publishers last year. Yes, Image isn't going to go out of business because they're set up a little bit differently, but there are going to be more dominoes to fall because nobody wants to be the best. Nobody wants to be the best alternative superhero comics out there. Nobody wants to have the best horror lineup of comic books out there. They're all just collaborators and enjoying their own success or lack thereof together. And that's why American comic books suck. Do you think manga is out there going, man, I'm just so happy that DC Comics were able to sell so many copies of Detective Comics 1000. Like, good for them, good for them. And I do believe manga takes it personally when either DC or Marvel or even IDW with the last Ronin story arc even becomes a blip in their ecosphere, because they know DC, Marvel, and American comic books are below them at this point. It's absolutely ridiculous what's happened. Now let's get to the big crux of all of it, because he asked about this too. This furloughed individual also said they think many of the long-term fans of comics are toxic, and a person should only have to tolerate so much toxicity. They are currently waiting to be called back, but their loyalty only goes so far. They do have to pay their bills, by the way. They're gone, but they don't even realize it yet. You didn't get put out of a job because there was a paper shortage. You got put out of a job because you lost all your fucking customers out there. How did you lose all your customers? Maybe calling them toxic all the time was a way to do that. They've driven so many people away, it's not even funny. And that's the big excuse, right? You go out there and you write one of those shittiest comic books in the history of the world, and then you go, oh man, our fans are just toxic. They've been reading comic books for too long. Who needs these old 40-year-old guys that spend hundreds and potentially thousands of dollars a month on comic books? We've got a new audience to go out there, and those guys suck anyway because they've read so many stories that when I write a story, they can tell it sucks and it doesn't go along with canon and stuff like this. You're not the problem. I'm not the problem. The comic book industry in America is the problem. There's a reason this isn't going on with manga. There's a reason this isn't going on with manhwa. There's a reason you don't hear this with European comic books. You only hear this shit with American comic books. They hate their customers. They intentionally drove them away, and now they're out of business. But it's just because there's paper shortages. It isn't because they had a customer shortage of their own creation because they thought they were so much better than their customers. They hate you. They hate me, and they want a better customer base. Well, you don't get one because you're still writing superhero comics, whether you like it or not. They can be bad superhero comics. They can be good superhero comics. And I'm still going to be here. And I'm going to throw it in your face when you write a bad comic book. And I'm going to congratulate you when you did a good comic book. And I'm going to try to get the word out there. But you guys have turned so many people off. You've told so many people to get the fuck out of this industry that they've gone over to manga. And they likely aren't coming back at this point. Recently, I had a conversation with my good friend Eric Green talking about old school comic fans and how they feel and why they turn their backs on DC, Marvel, and the entire American comic book industry. If you haven't seen this, you need to see it right now. This is a great conversation. There's also a link in the video description.